I hijacked Bree's craft room again, so.
That works. No. So, I am super excited.
Okay, crank up all the way.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Trying to narrow down underrated 90s thrillers, even to just 20, proved difficult, because was that pretty much the only genre of the 90s was thrillers of some sort? That's kind of what it seems like.
It would have been easy. It would have been easy if we had just been like, hey, you know what we should do? Make our top 20 favorite psychedelic music of the 60s. Like, I feel like that would have been easier.
It would have been about equally challenging there to try to get those narrowed down, but I had a bunch of movies I intended to watch, but was not able to get around to because it's been crazy around here lately. So my kitchen's currently torn up, having an impromptu remodel because my dishwasher pipe exploded in my wall. So yeah. They had to come out and cut a bunch of stuff out of my wall, but yay, home ownership.
Yeah.
It's got its ups and downs.
They've been remodeling the house next door, and they decided to both set the dirt for a new driveway and pour said driveway both times before the sun was up during the week. So it's like 5:30 in the morning. You're hearing like the lease truck pop, boop, boop, back up to pour concrete.
That's what you want opening you up, waking you up on a daily basis, or is construction work. I know they had construction work near my house repairing the road, and that's how it was. I blocked off part of my road, and sure enough, 6 a.m. in the morning, they were there with their dump trucks.
Yeah.
So
it hasn't been bad for me. I had to get to go to work. Amber's been on vacation, so luckily nobody's gone to jail this week. So we're all thankful for that.
Oh man.
Well, I guess we'll kind of chit chat here for a minute. Have you got to see anything recently? Anything worth talking about?
Other than a few things I watched for this list.
Not really.
Oh, I went to see the Bob's Burgers movie. It was great. I loved it. That was the only movie I've gone to see in the theaters in the last few months, but it was definitely worth seeing. Love Bob's Burgers. There were some great musical numbers, and they actually gave it a fairly intense plot as well. I was pretty impressed. So
I wanted
that
to
was the
see that. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
If you're a Bob's Burgers fan, it's a must. It's a lot of fun, but it's maybe not necessarily one of those you got to see it in the big screen movies, but I'm glad I did just because we love Bob's Burgers so much in this house. So.
Oh yeah.
But
I am upset because here, especially Weatherford, but usually to see the artsy stuff, I'd have to go all the way to the city. But since everything opened back up, UConn, their AMC has been bringing it. So I saw X there, Men played there, and then some sweet Crimes of the Future, here we come. Nobody in Oklahoma got it.
Yeah, Oklahoma probably just banned that outright.
They're like
Cronenberg.
What now?
Nope,
I don't
nope.
think so.
You mean the dystopian Oklahoma government isn't down with body horror? Can't believe that.
No, not big fan. It made me think of when we wanted to go see was it Lords of Salem? We were gonna go watch?
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, so we were gonna go watch Lords of Salem before our first year to Texas Frightmare. And it was showing at in Norman, Oklahoma at 11:30 in the morning. And it was always showing.
Coming through kind of fuzzy, so I think that's my case.
Oh. So yeah, so that was our experience trying to see that movie. And sadly, then we came back and it wasn't showing. So after spending the whole weekend, everybody celebrating this great new Rob Zombie movie, and we didn't get to see it.
Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. My audio went out of my end. That's weird.
I don't know.
Oh, there it goes. That's fine.
Even your phone hates Crimes of the
Oh,
Future.
shit, are we on the delay again?
So yeah, this I guess we started with the biggest thing we could do is talk about, because when we said we kind of talked about doing the list stuff because the Nick Cage episode was so fun. It's like, let's do list stuff, and you mentioned thrillers of the 90s. I'm like, heck yeah, let's do thrillers of the 90s. And then once I started digging into it, I was like, oh crap, uh-oh. There are so many thrillers. You there? Can you hear
It's
me?
like I'm getting overlapping audio. Yeah, but now there's a delay.
Oh no.
Gotta mess with my phone. All right, let me rejoin. I'm going to leave, then I'll rejoin.
Okay.
It's like he was getting the audio from the actual live.
From the live instead of actually just
There
yeah.
is a delay.
Which there was before, but we attributed it to. You're gonna have to join the dark side of Apple, my friend. No, Bezos. That's not Bezos. It's well, he's no longer alive.
Bezos.
He's the guy from Amazon.
It was on.
Well, Steve Jobs has sorely passed, and so it's whoever's in. What's his name's like Tim something. Tim. That guy from Apple. That's my terrible Matt Berry from the IT Crowd impersonation. Let me see if I can, Nick. Hang on here. Your viewers. It does not show you, sir, as a viewer. So you may have to get out of Facebook and come back into it. Because it's not showing you as a viewer.
Maybe in as Movie Club.
Are you in as Nick or are you in as Movie Club?
Oh, he's in it.
Okay, there you are. Hang on. Send request. Okay. We'll get it. Oh, it didn't do it. Hang on. Oh, that's weird. Exit out of it, Nick, because it's saying you can't join it this time. You've made it mad. Now let's see what happens. Can't bring Nick Hinton on as a guest. They can't join your broadcast at this time. It doesn't like you. It just doesn't want us to talk about thrillers of the 90s. Try to, yeah, so leave it completely and come back in if you can hear me and see if hang on. It's doing something. It's doing something. There we go.
All right, am I?
Now you're back.
Okay, and I'm going to try to not touch my phone because No matter the phone, anytime I try to touch it, bad things happen. So I guess we're sticking with the single. Okay, so underrated thrillers of the 90s. The time has come.
Yes.
I love talking about underrated movies because I love, ever since you and I, when we were young, would pick out movies at the video store, I loved getting genuinely surprised by something. Seeing something that is vastly underappreciated. And in the 90s, since thrillers were so huge, I mean, of course, Seven probably being the premier one, it was a genre that exploded. In the early 90s, from the 80s on into the 90s, you had erotic thrillers, which, you know, they made tons of those, and most of them were bad and unmemorable, but the genre really got huge in the 90s. And so it's natural that a lot of them would kind of fly under the radar and not be as appreciated as they should be. So we came up with our own separate lists of what we believe are the 20 most underrated thrillers of the 90s. And I think we're going to do it like we did last time, where you'll read your number 20 and I'll read my number 20 and go down the list like that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, underrated thrillers of the 90s. Thank you, anyone who joined us. I always like having people here. I hope you all get involved in the chats, and I hope we can inform you all about some new movies. So why don't you start us off with number 20, Jason?
I will start with my number 20, and I will say this movie kind of eats its way on my list, only because I think it should be talked about, and it's Jade. So if you've seen this cover, you're like, man, that's one erotic thriller, and you would think that because it's written by the guy who wrote Basic Instinct, it's directed by the guy who made The Exorcist, and it has like a 1990s David Caruso in it. But it is super not sexy. In fact, it's kind of mostly boring, except that they're talking about some wild stuff for a 90s movie. And so I was sitting here watching it being just kind of like, why would William Friedkin make this movie? And then in the middle of the movie, there's like a 25-minute car chase. And you go,
What?
Oh yeah, William Friedkin made the French Connection. Because this car chase is like through like San Francisco, Chinatown. It's awesome. But like it's so not sexy. But again, you look at the cover, you think it would be. But I mean, like I said, you have David Caruso, you have Linda Fiorentino, Michael Biehn is in it as like a gross, dirty detective, and Chaz Palminteri. Like everything about this movie should just be awesome, and it's not really. It does have like an ending where you're like, oh, okay, did not see that ending coming. But yeah, it's just one that nobody would ever talk about. So it eats on my list at number 20 just because I really wanted to talk about how weird it is that the guy from The Exorcist made an unerotic erotic thriller.
William Friedkin's filmography is kind of all over the place.
It's so
it
may be less sexy than Killer Joe.
Gotta say, Killer Joe is another one of those movies that has sexy stuff in it that is completely unsexy, and it's a good movie. It's just disturbing and ends abruptly. But man, that guy knows how to unsexy sexy stuff. So there you go. I'm trying to remember if I had anything William Friedkin on my list. I should have wrote down the directors. Do you remember that movie we watched when we were younger, Deal of the Century, with Chevy Chase?
Yeah.
That was a William Friedkin movie. Yeah, a Chevy Chase comedy about the arms race.
Yeah.
That dude took a lot of jobs for the money, I think. But
oh yeah.
I'd actually heard about Jade recently. I was watching old episodes of Siskel and Ebert, and they repeatedly talk about how much they hate that movie. So.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's how I'm most familiar with it. I remember the cover and never seen it, but that echoes pretty much what I've heard is that it's not great, but it's something.
Oh, it's a
like my number 20.
Man, that's
it.
That's it.
My number 20 is one I threw on the list. I I question whether to put it on the list because I'm not saying it's a great movie, but it's memorable, and it's just so bizarre. And that movie, I'm pretty sure you've seen this one, is Boxing Helena or Boxing Helena. What's the guy's name? Who I can't remember the main guy's name.
It's Julian Sands, the warlock.
Julian
himself.
Sands plays this eccentric doctor who's in love with this beautiful woman, and she gets in a car wreck, and he decides to amputate her legs at home, and antics ensue. It's a really bizarre movie. I said I should have wrote this down. It's not great. Julian Sands, Bill Paxton in leather pants is in it too. It's just for the sheer audacity of it, I think it should be remembered.
Yeah.
Not because it's a good movie, because it's not. But it's kind of going for that erotic thriller, kind of like Jay did. And it doesn't quite work, but it's just so weird. I had to include it. But again, I'll say, not a great movie, but it's something. Sherilyn Flynn. She was from Twin Peaks. She was in it. She played Helena. She was great. And it's like the acting was pretty solid, but it was just the script is ridiculous. Jennifer Lynch, David Lynch's daughter, directed that, and that's just she never really took off because, well, she's not that great of a director. But at least check out a trailer, read about it. It's something. I love movies that go out there and really take a chance to do something really weird, and they did, and it doesn't work, but I had to throw it on my list.
No, I totally applaud it because it's like I had a huge crush on Sherilyn Flynn between that movie and Two Moon Junction and Meridian, like that weird Beauty and the Beast movie she's in.
Oh yeah, the Full Moon Beauty and the Beast. Yes.
Yeah, but no, Boxing Helena. It's like an erotic. It's like if Kevin Smith shot Tusk as an erotic thriller.
That's pretty appropriate comparison.
No, it's not good. She did make a good movie. It's
that snake movie.
That's fun.
Was that it?
Hollywood horror movie. No, Surveillance, the one that has Bill Pullman in it. It's like
I've heard of that, never seen it.
It's an early 2000s. We're still trying to do movies like this, but the decade has definitely changed over. But it's not a bad movie. Bill Pullman is really good in it. My number 19 is a movie that I had not heard of until I heard somebody just mention it as like kind of a lost movie, and then I found it on Amazon, and it's called Lone Star from 1996.
I remember Lone Star.
And it's got Chris Cooper. Thankfully, he doesn't have any Nazi plates in this movie. And Chris Christopherson and a really early McConaughey. And it's a really good. It's a good movie. I don't know if it's based on a book. I think it might be, and it feels like it's based on a book. But no, you watch it for like Chris Cooper's really good in it, and like I said, it's an early McConaughey. There are some twists that I don't think are great, but it is a really good movie about this like cop trying to find out whether or not his dad killed this crooked sheriff. It's all the flashbacks are with McConaughey. He's like kind of scary in it for a little bit. Like he's just a real stoic, like no nonsense guy. And Chris Christopherson like is real a-hole in it. But no, it was really good. It was one that I was like, I'd never heard of this movie, but I would have never heard of it. And just kind of caught it on the list or something and watched it and really did, for the most part, enjoy it. But it does feel like it's a book movie. Like it, I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, it's just.
It does, yeah. And how it's laid out, yeah, I know what you mean, yeah. And speaking of underrated, Chris Cooper, that dude is horribly underrated. because the more stuff I see him in, he's one of those guys that has appeared in so many things in the last 30 years, but has never quite got that, at least that leading man level. But, well, I need to preface this. The first few picks on my list, as we're counting down, I'm not saying they're great movies. They're worth a look, and they're at least fun.
Same.
Yeah. As I said, getting my 1 through 10 wasn't hard. Was hard. These were just kind of placing them. A lot of these could be interchangeable at various points on my list too. It's just what I was feeling at the time. And I have a Brian De Palma movie. Oh God, this movie cracks me up so much. It's a thriller. It gets really unintentionally funny. Stars John Lithgow, and that's Raising Cain. John Lithgow is I believe, a psychiatrist, and he has issues of multiple personalities. It's this really twisty plot that's got one of those gotcha endings. Yeah, the last 30 seconds are like real. It's funny, and you didn't quite see it coming. It's really over the top. Brian De Palma is a great director. All the elements don't quite work, but John Lithgow gives it everything. And it's a fun watch. It doesn't quite work on the thriller level. I mean, it is a thriller. It's just ridiculous, but I think it probably deserves a cult following. So that's why I threw it on my list. Yeah, just laughing a lot while talking about this. From '92, Raising Cain, directed by Brian De Palma. It's something.
I will save my piece on Raising Cain at a later date because we will be talking about this again shortly.
Okay.
My number 18 is one that is just nutso. And to me, it's like, when you think of the best thrillers of the 90s, this isn't on that list. But it checks all those boxes. It just does it wrong. And it's Color of Night. It's an erotic thriller, whodunit, with Bruce Willis. And it's absolutely absurd. Like, he's a psychiatrist, and Scott Bakula is his friend who's a psychiatrist. And he's murdered by, you assume, one of his patients. Because he runs like this weird group session sexaholics thing. And so you have all these character actors like Lance Henderson, Brad Dourif, the lady, I can't remember her name. And Bruce Willis is trying to find who killed his friend while also hooking up with this lady. And she's tied into it somehow. It's ridiculous. There's a scene where he opens a mailbox and a rattlesnake jumps out of him, and it's just a snake on a wire. It's super sexy Bruce Willis. Again, it's everything you want out of this kind of a movie, just done wrong. But it's so sleazy and fun. If you can find it, you watch it, because you're gonna have a gross, skeezy early 90s good time with it, because it's ridiculous. But it's
another one I've heard of. I did a lot of Googling, looking up movies, and that popped up. I didn't get around to watching it, but it sounded intriguing. A lot of the people echo your sentiments about it. So, well, my number 18. Okay, so I've tried to not go as heavy on the sci-fi and straight up horror thrillers, but there's one that has been completely forgotten despite having 2 big actors in it. Probably forgotten because it has aged horribly. It's a cyberpunk-esque movie from the mid-90s with Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe. Virtuosity. Denzel Washington's a cop, and for some reason the scientist makes this computer program that has the personalities of 110 serial killers, including the one who, of course, murdered Denzel Washington's wife. And through a bunch of 90s magical computer science, he gets a physical form, this hyper serial killer and goes on a rampage through the city. And of course, it's up to Denzel Washington to stop him. Why I remember this movie so much is our 2001 video had a standee for Virtuosity. And you could go up there and you put your hand on it, and that like this little piece of like sheet of plastic would change color while you put your hand on it. So of course I played with that a lot while I was a kid. This movie has been completely lost to the ages, and probably because it's not great. Russell Crowe had yet to really hit his acting stride, and he hams it up. He cranks it up to 11 the entire movie, as I believe his name is Sid in the movie, the serial killer. And he's this digital creation that's gained physical form, and he's really hard to kill. He can like rebuild himself using glass or silicon or something to that effect, and it's ridiculous, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a lot of fun. I'm really wondering how they got Denzel Washington 2 years out from winning an Oscar for Malcolm X to do this movie. I don't know if they held part of his family hostage or what, but it's entertaining and a really 90s. It's one of the most 90s movies you will ever see. And let's say Denzel Washington will be showing up a few more times on my list. Virtuosity, not a great movie, but again, kind of like Raising Cain, kind of like Boxing Helena, it's something to behold.
Yeah, Amber and I did a podcast episode over that movie. Doing this list, I'm like, man, before Malcolm X, Denzel Washington was in some movies. Like, he was in some stuff. But I love that movie because it's essentially what if Russell Crowe played the Joker? Because he is 100% the Joker in that movie. That
Checking something
God
real
bless
quick.
that guy who made that and the Lawnmower Man. Like, that guy really thought like cyberspace was gonna be the bees. Like, it was it. Cyberspace. This is what we were gonna be.
With 90s CGI. Yeah, this movie came 3 years after Malcolm X. So Denzel Washington did Malcolm X, then decided 3 years later to make Virtuosity. That's some weird career trajectory, but that guy can do anything he wants. So why not? Maybe just have fun making it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I will definitely get to some Denzel on my list as well. All right, so at 17, this one is kind of one I remember watching a lot on TV, because I'm pretty sure USA played this movie all the time, and hadn't really like seen like the uncut version of it. It's Sliver with Sharon Stone and I think it's William Baldwin. And she moves in like this fancy new apartment, and like he owns the building, but he also has the building like wired with cameras and sound, like he sees everything. And it's a very like voyeuristic. It's actually a really good like 90s version, like a sexy 90s version of Rear Window, as opposed to like the Shia LaBeouf Rear Window knockoff.
Disturbia, yeah.
Yeah. This I like this movie a lot. I didn't think I would as much. Tom Berenger's in it, and he plays like this like really sleazy novelist. And it's 1993 Sharon Stone, baby. Just mwah.
Sleazy is a term that will come up a lot on this list, I have a feeling.
Yeah.
I know it will for me.
100%.
Yes, and man, what USA back in the 90s, they just played thrillers nonstop. Any given day you turn on USA, there would be some thriller playing, at least once during the day.
I watched so many movies, inappropriate for my age bracket movies, thanks to USA. Whether it was horror movies, like they used to do the President's Daymare, and it was like, that's how I saw the Chucky for the very first time. Or like they were always playing that and Tremors, and then like Cabin by the Lake and stuff like that, like just sleazy movies.
Good old USA.
Yeah.
My number 17. So there's a story behind this one. I was in the hospital 10 years ago, back in 2012, and this movie came on. I was waiting to see if I would need a bone marrow transplant for the disease I had. That's a story for another time. And a movie came on local Seattle cable about a guy. It was an interesting setup. So Michael Keaton is this dangerous killer who happens to be the only bone marrow match for this FBI agent's son. Desperate Measures with Andy Garcia and Michael Keaton. I believe that was from '97. So yeah, that's the basic setup. They have to transport this incredibly dangerous prisoner to a hospital so he can donate bone marrow to this FBI agent's son. Well, Michael Keaton, being the criminal mastermind, gets loose and is trying to escape the hospital, and cops trying to catch him, but keep him alive so he can donate bone marrow to his son. It's something of an interesting premise. Doesn't quite work on all levels. Michael Keaton really gives it of his all, and he really makes you buy the character, as does Andy Garcia. They really elevate the material above what it deserved because they are both so intense, and they play off each other really well. Not well reviewed, not terribly successful, but for a good old 90s thriller, it ratchets up the tension, and it's got some pretty stellar acting. So, Desperate Measures.
Yeah. Again, I will be saving my thoughts on that film for a later date. My number 16, but I will finally talk about this. It is Brian De Palma's Raising Cain. I gotta ask, did you watch the? Because I got it on Shout Factory Blu-ray. Did you watch the theatrical cut or like the re-edited, like resequenced cut?
The theatrical cut. I watched
Okay.
the original one because I watched it on tape. So
Okay.
that's probably
that's
the theatrical version.
Okay, so I watched the other cut, which kind of, what I think will help kind of puts things a little more in order than the actual like theatrical cut. Like it kind of rearranges where some things happen in the movie to kind of make them a little more linear. This isn't,
that could help.
This isn't a like De Palma's best because I love De Palma, but like John Lithgow, like this should be talked about, a performance. Maybe not quite on the level of McAvoy and Split because he's doing a lot more, but like the things that that Lithgow does in this movie is wild to think of just one guy doing all these characters, because he is playing Cain, he's playing the father. There is that weird De Palma trope about, men dressed as women, which kind of
that seems to trope a lot in his work.
Huh?
Oh yeah, like Dress to Kill. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
I probably gave away that very obvious twist.
Spoilers for like a movie that's 45 years old. But yeah, I that movie lives and dies by Lithgow, and he is great. Well, him and then the woman who plays his wife, she's great in it. But that is Lithgow's movie, and it's, when you think of like Nutso Lithgow, there's another movie I've got on this list that I think does a little more with Nutso Lithgow, but him in that movie playing those characters is a lot of fun. So I have a feeling I know which movie.
I have a feeling I know the other Lithgow movie you're talking about. We'll get to that later. Really, it does. John Lithgow is a great actor, and he really makes it worth watching. If it hadn't been for him going for it, the movie would have probably not been watchable. He makes it work though, and it's, if nothing, no other reason, see it for John Lithgow's performance. Totally agree.
Yeah.
My number 16 veers into the sci-fi territory, but I enjoyed it, and I really felt the need to include it. Kids getting their minds messed with in a small coastal town in 1998's Disturbing Behavior, with James Marsden, Nick Stahl, and Katie Holmes. A lot of the teen heartthrobs back then show up in it, and kid moves to a new town, and these seem to notice these kids who have some serious anger problems, and also a friend of his has a very radical personality shift. So he teams up with the janitor to work figuring out the mystery as to why these kids are personalities are so drastically changing all of a sudden, and why they're more prone to violent acts. A lot of sci-fi mumbo jumbo, and peeking behind the curtain, seeing what's going on. There's a conspiracy afoot and whatnot. I think it works well as a thriller. I think the acting's surprisingly good. It's a pretty well done movie, actually, considering you think of it just be a pretty bargain basement teen thriller. I think they really put some effort into it. I quite enjoyed it, and it's a nice little fun of late 90s nostalgia.
Yeah. Now, when we talked about after this, talked about eventually doing like 90s horror movies, there's that and another movie that was the first two movies that came to mind when I thought about it, because it is one of those kind of lost late 90s horror movies that is really good. Plus, you get that banging Harvey Danger song, like Flagpole Sitta. Yeah, that movie rules.
Yes. And I love the janitor. And I can't remember his name all of a sudden. William Sadler, that's it. William Sadler. Guy, vastly underrated, and he doesn't have a big role, but I really like his character in that movie.
Yeah. No, that's one we'll have to talk about at some point, yeah, because I go into depth because I do like that movie a lot. So, with my number 15, we've kind of stepped out of my, ironically, they kind of go in a weird thing here. I kind of have left for the most part, the erotic thrillers behind, because now we're going to hit a measure of at least a couple of 7 knockoffs, because 7 was so big that immediately after 7 hit, people were like, all right, let's do that. And so my number 15 is Resurrection, which is a 100, like, unapologetic 7 knockoff. But you get Christopher Lambert, so immediately it's like 5 stars. Leland Orser, the "He May Be Murder" guy from 7, but he's playing like a cop. David Cronenberg shows up as a priest really briefly. And it's directed by Russell Mulcahy. And the 7-ness of it is Leland Orser and Christopher Lambert are cops. Christopher Lambert is dealing with a trope of a lot of movies from the 90s, especially in the thriller genre and cop movies. He has dead kid syndrome. And they're hunting down a serial killer who is revving up for Easter by killing people and then removing certain body parts because he's building his own life-size crucifix.
I remember that plot, and the title didn't ring a bell, but no, yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah. The only
Very
downside,
7-ish.
it is fun and it's very 7. It's such a blatant rips. It's a real like 7. I don't even want to say like Armageddon Deep Impact. It's just like, no, it's a blatant ripoff. It's almost like Asylum level. No, this is that movie, Grandma. That's the one I wanted. The one where the cops chase the religious killer. Oh, Resurrection! But Russell Mulcahy directs the crap out of it. And again, Lambert is going to get you several stars. The only problem is the killer wears like this stupid like yellow latex mask. And he just looks ridiculous. It looks like one of those like little squeezy, like when you squeeze it and like the guy's ears and mouth pop out, like the little stress guys.
Yeah.
Because they have like this weird like bottle mouth, like it's like a yellow Gimp mask, and it looks terrible. Like if anything you could have done, that's what you went with. But no, check it out. Vinegar Syndrome just like released this beautiful Blu-ray restoration of it, and you're like, why this movie? But no, it's good stuff, especially if you love 7 and you just want to kind of dig that vibe. It is definitely hitting all those 7 notes.
Hold on, give me a second. I'll be right back. I'm gonna go for my number 15.
Yeah. So what about you guys? You guys that are here now. We're talking underrated 90s thrillers. Is there any of them that jump out at you? Movies from the 90s that thriller movies that nobody talks about. Oh, here we go.
Okay, I'm back. Number 15 is it's a fun one. Again, we're leaving behind some of the stuff that I have to put the qualifier around. Samuel L. Jackson, Gina Davis, and The Long Kiss Goodnight. There could be an argument that this is more action than thriller, but I think it fits the requirements enough due to the twisty plot and then trying to figure out what's really going on. And Gina Davis wakes up in a small town with amnesia and goes about her life. Turns out she was actually a super deadly assassin who was shot and thrown off a cliff, then somehow managed to survive. And it's her going about trying to regain her memories with the help of sleazy detective Samuel L. Jackson. It's Gina Davis pretty much playing dual roles in it as the woman she became after the injury and getting amnesia, then reverting back to the super deadly assassin before. It's fun. It's ridiculous. There's a lot of ridiculous action pieces, but it's very much worth watching. It's on the edge whether or not you consider this a thriller. Based off the definitions, I think it came in just under. I remember watching as a teenager, and I've watched it since. It's a really fun movie, and the plot does take some interesting directions. So, yeah, I recommend it.
Yeah, no, it's my favorite like Shane Black directed movie. Like I remember when we started watching it because Shaw loved it so much, but I love that movie. Yeah, that movie. Have you ever seen The Long Kiss Goodnight?
No.
Oh man, we'll have to watch it because that movie rules. All right, so we're still on that 19 like post 97 7 knockoff, and this one I remember this was purely for nostalgia because I remember renting it with my dad. We're talking about Bone Daddy. So it's Rutger Hauer. He still has like his Buffy the Vampire Slayer mustache, and he plays he's like the Chicago pathologist he's the best pathologist that ever pathology. And he writes a book about the one killer he never caught, the Bone Daddy, who would kidnap people and remove their bones while they were still alive. Yeah, it's messed up. And then so he writes his book, so that upsets Bone Daddy. And so Bone Daddy starts taking people close to him. And it's just the idea of having your leg bones removed while you're still alive. But then he doesn't remove your leg. He cuts your leg open, removes all the bones out of it, and then stitches it back up, and then sends him your bones. But yeah, I remember running with my dad and being like, "Bone Daddy, we're watching Bone Daddy," and it's not a bad 7 knockoff. It's a terrible title, but Rutger Hauer is great in it.
Yeah.
So I think I remember it's like a staple of Showtime now, but it's Showtime. Watch Bone Daddy because despite the title,
I know I always got that confused with another movie that came out. That was a thriller that came out around the same time, and that's The Bone Collector with Denzel Washington.
Yeah. Oh,
for
sure.
a while,
yeah.
I thought those two were the same movie, and it's just because they have some similarities in plot and title, and I've heard Bone Collector's way better, but I don't know. But that's one.
It is.
I love Rutger Hauer, and that sounds like a terrifying concept for a serial killer. But that's another one. I didn't even think to look into that one. Well, number 14 is another one that has a little bit of a sci-fi horror slant to it, but I think it definitely fits. Bunch of people wake up in a square room, and they have to figure out what got them there, where they're going, how they get out. Cube from 1998. It's really a pretty simple setup. Apparently, it was mostly made on one set. They just kept on reconfiguring because the deal is there's these, I believe, 6 people that have different talents and whatnot and different backgrounds, and they have to basically solve all these puzzles in this bizarre prison that has all number of crazy traps in there. and they have to use math to solve issues and try to figure out how to get out, all the while they have no food or water, so they're on a time crunch. They did a lot with not much, and some people may not like some of the lack of explanation or the payoff, but I think it all works together really well. I've never seen Cube, Hypercube, or Cube Zero. I think the original Cube is still very much worth a look. And it's very tense, and the whole time I think it keeps you really engaged as to why this is happening and what's going on.
Yeah, no, I like Cube a lot, and it's one of those. To me, it's weird that it is kind of forgotten, because you would think with as much love as especially that first Saw gets, because this is kind of like Saw before Saw, at least that first Saw movie.
Yeah, really it is.
And like it just like why this movie wasn't like embraced as big as Saw got, why nobody ever kind of talked about Cube. It's a real like because I just watched a documentary about found footage. It's like a real like The Last Broadcast or the McPherson tapes that came out like right before Blair Witch Project. And they're just kind of lost the time now because Blair Witch was so huge. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and that's.
I love Cube. It's very Canadian.
Yeah, the comparison to Saw.
Really good.
Yes, and the comparison to Saw is apt. Only it doesn't go as heavily into the gore. Saw really tries to gross you out. Cube doesn't, but it's like the traps are like, oh man, that's frightening. But it's not a gross out movie, which I like that it showed a little bit of restraint in it, and I think it's just an intelligently done movie. I mean, a lot of the actors in it aren't terribly well known, but I think they did well in it. So check out Cube.
All right, so my 13 will be an easy breeze because we're going to talk about Desperate Measures again. It is a little higher mostly because of Michael Keaton. Especially like not watching a lot of Michael Keaton movies as a kid, like, you know, besides Beetlejuice and Batman. And then later, like, finding this movie and, how was it? Night Shift, the weird cop movie with him and Henry Winkler in it. And
yes.
Pacific Heights. Like that weird, he plays like that one. Like, you're like, oh man, Michael Keaton was doing some messed up movies in the 90s. But yeah, Andy Garcia is great in it, but you watch this movie, you can't take your eyes off Michael Keaton. He is terrifying and charming the whole time in this movie. He's great. He's the best part of this movie.
I think so, and it really fleshes out his character and shows his motivations, his humanity, and him trying to appeal to that and whatnot, and talking about some of his own trauma that led him to this position. They did a really good job writing the two main characters. So it's reading the reviews, it got trashed, and I'll be honest, I can get why it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I don't think it should have gotten the negative reception it did. And except a lot of it being carried on the shoulders of Michael Keaton and Andy Garcia, who just, man, they really did well with it. And in different hands with different actors, it would have been terrible. But they really pulled it together in that movie. So my number 13 was a movie that I think eerily predicted some of the response to 9/11. I remember when 9/11 happened and the response to it, it made me think of this movie starring Denzel Washington and Bruce Willis, The Siege from 1998. There's a terrorist attack in New York. So the government's response is to basically put New York into martial law and try to figure out what's going on. Denzel Washington is a federal agent. He's a negotiator, I believe, trying to get to the bottom of what happened in this terrorist attack because a bus was bombed. Suicide bombers took out a bus. And, you know, it's back before the Middle Eastern terrorists were used constantly as tropes in movies. It featured them. And it took a lot of unexpected turns, and it's a scary movie. Seeing what an attack like that, how the response can become incredibly tyrannical when people want to feel safe, they're afraid, so they take all these measures to protect people that are probably going too far. it's very sobering to watch in the post 9/11 world, but it's well done, well paced, and I think the siege should be remembered.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like that, I think because of 9/11, that is why kind of that movie is forgotten. And yeah, no, it's that has there are two movies that just I'll never forget them. It's that involve suicide bombing that will forever be burned in my mind. It's that one, and then Sicario 2, when the guys walk into the grocery store. Like, it's just the most terrifying thing you've seen. And then, yeah, but no, Bruce Willis is great. Annette Bening, too, who doesn't get a lot of play.
Oh, man.
She is so good in that movie.
She really is. Another lady who she gives it her all with whatever project she's handed. Even garbage projects like In Dreams, which did not make my list, but man, that's a weird movie. But, yeah, and just to comment on Sicario too, I think the two Sicario movies are modern classics. But that suicide bomber scene was absolutely frightening because of how completely plausible it was. So if y'all have never seen Sicario movies, do, but just know they are grim. They are so grim. But all right, back over to you.
So my number 12 is we're sticking with Denzel, and we're also going to talk about Lithgow. So I'm curious if this is the one you were thinking of. It's 1991's Ricochet. This movie rules.
Can I interject? Can I interject real quick?
Yeah.
My number 12 is also Ricochet. I kid you not.
Yes. I've been waiting. I was like,
anyway,
at least get one.
I hope so. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so Ricochet. It's Russell Mulcahy again, which I think he actually directs this one better than Resurrection. This is kind of, honestly, this is Law-Abiding Citizen done way better. But it's Denzel. He's like a rookie cop. He's got that early '90s Denzel swagger, and he just stupidly stumbles into taking down Lithgow, who plays this nutso. He's not even a mobster. Like, he wants to double cross the mob and take over.
He's just a killer. He's a straight up killer. That's what his motivation is.
You get this great the scene at the fair when he shoots Lithgow, and then it's just Lithgow. It's unhinged Lithgow. This movie would be so much higher if it wasn't for there's a trope, and it happens a lot. And it's a trope in movies that I hate, and it's like no matter who it is, even if it's your husband, it's your wife, your best friend who you've known forever, and you know everything about them, but then somebody starts making them look bad, or starts messing with their life, and then you're like, oh, you know what? He's probably drug crazed and banging hookers. You figured I would have seen something, but that's probably what it was. It's not like there's a guy out, that he put in jail. No, it must be that he's completely just got off the deep end. I hate that trope in movies.
Yeah.
Just the whole
after he becomes
hero. Do I?
After he becomes this successful, is it the district attorney or assistant district attorney? Yeah. Yes, and he goes all that way. Then John Lithgow basically, after a crazy prison sentence, one part that always stuck in my mind is that part where he's in prison, where they put on phone book body armor and fight with knives on the end of broomsticks.
It turns into Gladiator for 5 minutes.
Yes, and it's just it's not, you don't think of John Lithgow like that, but man, he brings it. He is so scary in this movie, and he's not only capable of great physical violence, he's extremely smart. So it goes about destroying Denzel Washington's life in the most horrible ways he can think of. And Denzel Washington had to get creative in order to thwart him. How is this movie not known more? This is one of them that really baffles me, how no one remembers this movie. It's never talked about. because I think it's a great thriller and has two
Oh yeah.
awesome performances in it, and it's well paced, it's well executed, and man, I just can't. John Lithgow as a villain, people saw it in that season of Dexter where he played the Trinity Killer.
Trinity Killer.
He can do it. That guy, he can pull off a variety of roles, and I think he's been underutilized in a lot of roles that I think he would have been very well qualified for. But yeah, watch Ricochet. It is criminally underrated. I'm going to take a quick pee break.
Yeah,
I will be right back.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just say a couple quick things about Ricochet. I think one reason that probably it does have a weird ending. And again, it does have that trope that I hate it. I hate that trope of just like, oh, my husband's never done drugs a day in his life, but they found him. He was missing for days. He's a high-profile attorney who puts criminals away. This criminal has escaped from or has gotten out of prison. And we found my husband days later. He says he was tied up and shot with needles. But, I guess he's probably just addicted to heroin now. He's just been doing heroin. There is some weirdness with Ice-T, who pops up as a gangster. And we'll talk about Ice-T later, for sure. We'll talk about Ice-T later, but Ice-T is just like, that's my friend, Denzel. And then he gets him and because Denzel has nowhere to go except to like the street gang. And they it's a real like reversal, kind of like a Batman to the Penguin reversal of fortunes for John Lithgow. But the movie does end kind of goofy. But no, I agree 100%. Ricochet is awesome. I don't know why it's not talked about. There's a great one of the podcasts that I love. I know Nick listens to. We Hate Movies did a great episode on Ricochet. But I would love to do an episode of our stuff on John Lithgow, because if you're my age, you mostly just kind of remember him from Harry and the Hendersons and Third Rock from the Sun. And then you start watching movies like this, like Raising Cain, Cliffhanger, where you're just like, holy crap, this guy is terrifying. So yeah, I would love to talk more about this guy, because he is very underutilized. And when he does come up in some stuff, you're kind of like, you kind of like held onto the leash too tight. Let Lithgow go just a little bit. He has those moments where he can go super like full Super Saiyan Cage, and you need to let him do it every once in a while, because when he does, it's fun. All right, so my number 11 is a movie that I had not seen, but I remember the soundtrack being such a huge thing. And then I watched it for this, was like, oh, this movie's awesome. And it's 1993's Judgment Night. So it's a real, like, it's Emilio Estevez, Cuba Gooding Jr., who's the guy who plays?
Dennis Leary?
Kevin Dillon? Huh?
Dennis Leary. I think you're right about Kevin Dillon, from the guy from Entourage, whose name I can never remember.
Jeremy Piven plays the one friend.
Okay, yeah, okay.
But
Yeah.
They're like
That's
driving this like ridiculous like RV of the future to like a basketball game. And they end up in the wrong side of town, and then they like witness something they shouldn't, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, Dennis Leary of all people and his goons are out to snuff any witnesses. And it is a real like, look, suburb guys, stay out of the inner city because you're gonna get murdered. But they are great. It is fun watching Emilio Estevez do these movies like this. Of course, like Repo Man and and Maximum Overdrive. But when I think Emilio Estevez, I don't think like action star. But he is great in
You
this
think
movie.
Mighty Ducks?
Yeah, it's Coach Bombay. Dennis Leary is awesome in this movie. I love that Stephen Hopkins, who directs this, he also directed Predator 2. And to me, honestly, nobody shoots LA as better than him, aside from like Michael Mann. Because the way he lights all this stuff is so great. It's a real kind of a nail biter of a movie because the whole movie's like a one night. Things just keep getting worse, getting worse. There's one death in particular involving a rooftop that is just, it's like heartbreaking to watch. But no, check out again. Hey, you have an awesome soundtrack, especially like early '90s hip hop. But no, Judgment Night. I like again, never having seen the movie, just knowing the soundtrack. This movie was awesome. I absolutely adore it.
That's one I had. I was gonna try to watch that beforehand because it shows up in a lot of underrated '90s thrillers lists, and I love it. I love the concept in movies when it's used of people being lost in a part of the city, a place that's supposed to have civilization, but they're trapped in this hellscape, and there's all these people around, but they can't get help. There was a good use of that in an old anthology called After Midnight, or is it 10 till midnight? After Midnight, yes. But I love it. It's like an assault on Precinct 13. They're in a city, but they're so isolated from help. It's, I don't know. I've always found that terrifying. I think big cities, the more industrial parts of big cities that are more abandoned, something about them is just inherently scary. So this is one I'm going to watch and I think I will really enjoy. Yeah, it looks like it has all the elements of being great. So I'm looking forward to watching
like
that.
I said, it was a blast. Check it out. So your number 11?
my next one, number 11, is really it's a horror movie, but it captures the elements of a thriller and especially the atmosphere of a thriller. I couldn't leave it off the list because when we first watched it, it was just it captured this tenseness in such a fantastic, unique way, and it's so, I know the term's overused, but meta. It's very meta. Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I tried to get away from I tried not to have too much straight up real horror on this list, but as a thriller, it works. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to unfold, and this suburban house where a lot of it takes place is just terrifying. The movie is just tense and scary, really aided by a pretty awesome musical score over it that really ratchets up the tension. And you're not quite sure what's real, what's going on, what's imagined. New Nightmare, if you all don't know, is a part of the Nightmare on Elm Street series, but it's very different than the other ones because it has to do with our world, the real world, in which the main character was who played Nancy. I got that name right? In the original Nightmare on Elm Street. Who looks like she might be getting targeted by an entity that might be Freddy Krueger in the real world. Beginning to finish, it's tense. You can't keep your eyes off the screen. I didn't put it higher because I almost felt like it was cheating because it is so much of a horror movie, but I just could not leave it off this list. I love New Nightmare.
Yeah, New Nightmare is probably my favorite of the Nightmare. For sure, the sequels. It may rival the first one, honestly, because like you said, it is so intense, and it is. If you take out the Freddy Krueger aspect of it, it's like the most terrifying Lifetime movie you've ever seen in your life. Of like just mom
really,
like
yeah,
breaking. Kind of like something like the Babadook, only with a less annoying kid. But no, Heather Langenkamp is great in that movie. I totally see where you're coming from on that because I love that movie, and yeah, it is a thriller that just so happens to also be the seventh entry in a horror franchise. But no,
Yes.
that movie is hot. All right, we are entering top 10. And honestly, at my number 10, might be the most fun you'll have on this entire list. Because this movie was probably the most fun I had watching of any of these movies. It's 1992's Livewire. So it's a pre-Bond Pierce Brosnan. Let me set the stage. Pre-Bond Pierce Brosnan. He's a bomb disposal expert. And he too is suffering from dead kid syndrome. But there's like a, and it's really unclear of like what Ben Cross really wants. Like, is he just a terrorist, or is he kind of like a Timothy Oliphant and like live free or die hard type thing? But he has cracked this formula for like a C4 that is basically the same consistency, everything as water. But when you drink it, it mixes with your sweat, and it mixes with your sweat, and then like you move around, activates it, and within 30 seconds you become a human bomb. And so it's Pierce Brosnan trying to figure out who are killing these like senators, because the senators themselves are blowing up and killing them, like they become human bombs. Yeah, it's awesome.
That sounds awesome. How
Yeah,
have I never even heard of this movie?
It's so hard. Pierce Brosnan is just like drunk and like shirt open and just like smoking the whole movie. He's sexier in this than he is in The Lawnmower Man. And like people just like, what's the shrapnel? Is it ceramic? They're like, no sir, it's bone. Like it's awesome. It has this amazing 90s like guitar saxophone sex riff. Oh man, it's the best like 90 minutes you're gonna have. Of all 20 of these movies, it's the most fun I had watching any of these movies. It rules so hard. I think you can find it. I have it on VHS, but I think you can get it on Amazon. Get it and watch it because it rules.
Sounds like whoever wrote Iron Man got the idea for Extremis from there, because that's what that sounds like.
Yeah.
Injecting people something to become human bombs. Yeah. No, I love Pierce Brosnan. I have somehow managed to miss that all these years. I said that's one I've never even heard of. And for especially being apparently decently budgeted movie, I'm surprised, especially one that sounds that awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna hunt that down and watch it.
Yeah, it's
so not my number.
Blasty.
You'll hear this a lot about my numbers, the numbers 10 to 1. That how is this not regarded as a classic, especially given the talent involved. Directed by Bryan Singer, starring Ian McKellen as a Nazi in hiding. David Schwimmer, the late Brad Renfro, apt pupil, which if I'm not mistaken is based off a Stephen King story from 1998. Basically, Ian McKellen is a former Nazi officer hiding in suburbia, and his teenage neighbor finds this out and kind of shakes him down for he threatens to tell on him unless he regales stories about concentration camps to it. This kid's really messed up. So this kid's drawn in by the charm and the stories of this former Nazi SS officer, and things get more and more out of control and out of hand. Ian McKellen is very believable as this elderly Nazi who's trying to be this genial old man, but has some horrible secrets. And things just keep on getting weirder and more unglued and disturbing. Not one of those really graphic movies, but the implications of things are frightening. Somehow this one got lost in the shuffle. It's excellent. It's not action packed or anything, but it's a really great story realized on screen.
Yes, I will. I will save my thoughts on At People for much later, much later. But yes,
I struggled with, as I said, I struggled where to put my top 10 on the list because I went back and forth on it.
my number 9 is a movie that I remembered like visually, like have like the flashes of movies. You don't know what they are. You just remember images and maybe scenes in your head. And it was one I always remembered and didn't realize what it was till recently. I found it. Imagine my surprise to find it's a Larry Cohen movie, and it's The Ambulance. So yes, it's a 90's Larry Cohen movie, and it's Eric Roberts with this beautiful 90's Eric Roberts mullet, like best of the best level mullet. And he just like chatting some woman up on the street, and she has like a diabetic episode, and this old tiny ambulance, it's like, you know, Ghostbusters-esque ambulance, with green interior lights, pulls up and takes her away, and then he goes to find her, and he can't find her registered at any hospital. He starts doing some digging. James Earl Jones plays like a weird, like gum chewing cop in it. He's doing some weird performance. Like it's a real, like, we couldn't get Michael Moriarty, so we let James Earl Jones play the Michael Moriarty character. But the twist of it all is that it's not even a hospital. It's an underground doctor who has hired these thugs he finds and then follows diabetic people because he's kidnapping them, and then treating them as test subjects to cure diabetes, and then selling their organs and bodies to medical labs. It's so weird, but it's so good. Like I said, Eric Roberts is great in it. It is a real great whodunit, trying to figure out what's going on, where are these people going. And again, you get a James Earl Jones bizarre performance. And the bad guy, I cannot remember the actor's name. I remember him from watching soaps with my grandma. He was on one of them. He may still be on there if he's still alive. But no, again, this movie was nothing but a surprise to me, and especially how much I liked it. And it definitely has a lot of scenes that are very Larry Cohen, like, film it, we got to get out of here. We didn't permit any of this.
That tracks.
Yeah, but no, it's, especially for, I never really thought of Larry Cohen for doing like stuff from the 90's. But this movie was fun. It was a lot of fun. So track it down. It was really good.
It came up on my list of movies to watch. I didn't get around to it. Plot sounds awesome. Quite a racket falling around diabetic people, and yeah, the plot drop. I'm kind of iffy on Larry Cohen. He's, I think, really hit or miss, but yeah, you can miss me. I gotta watch that.
Yeah.
So another movie that, despite the level of talent involved, that's been lost to time, that also deals with the subject of domestic terrorism. And again, it's frighteningly plausible. 1999's Arlington Road with Jeff Bridges and Tim Robbins. Jeff Bridges is a professor, and Tim Robbins, and who is his wife? Sorry, I'm having to do some Google foo on the side here. Tim Robbins and Joan Cusack are this.
Yeah, Joan Cusack.
Joan Cusack. This all-American neighbors move in, and everybody loves them and thinks they're great. But Jeff Bridges' character thinks there's something more sinister going on. In the background, Jeff Bridges' wife had been an FBI agent who had been killed at a event similar to Waco. So he has these really personal feelings towards anything to do with maybe domestic terrorism and government involvement in things. And so he's already on a constant level of heightened alert. And he has a kid, and his kid plays with the next door neighbor's children, and there's just, the next door neighbors are too nice. But it also might just be that Jeff Bridges is super paranoid. because he comes across like a lunatic for a lot of the movie. I don't think the movie has tons of rewatchability, but man, that first time it was a gut punch. The way it ends, it's just, there's so much talent. There's the eerily plausible setting and how everything unfolds. Man, Arlington Road is, I do not get how this movie didn't succeed or why it's not regarded as a classic.
Now I remember always seeing the title on like HBO and stuff, but I think until I actually watched them, I always confused it just on principle, I don't know, with Mystic River. And so maybe that's one reason it kind of goes, because I think they came out around the same time. But yeah, that movie is that ending is, yeah, it's not a lot of rewatchability, but that you definitely should at least watch it once, because that movie and Tim Robbins is so good in it. He's so scary.
And Tim Robbins, and he's great. And Joan Cusack is just, and even their kid, who I don't know who plays her kid in that movie, the atmosphere is so unsettling in that movie as you're kind of following along and seeing what's going on. But yeah, I struggled where to put that on the list, but there's just some I liked a little more and I thought deserved a little more recognition. So back over to you.
So my number 8 is actually a movie that you introduced me to. So I'm curious if it pops up on your list. And I've been trying, like for weeks, I was trying to get the time where I could show it to Amber, but we never got around to watching it. It's The Passion of Darkly Noon. I think with his resurgence, it's good to see Brendan Fraser having his own reconnaissance. But if you've never seen The Passion of Darkly Noon, you're in for a treat, because it's a villain Brendan Fraser, and you get like super sexy Ashley Judd and a young pre-LOTR Viggo Mortensen. He's like this weird like religious zealot who, like, it's a real Norman Batesy type, like getting turned on as evil, and it's a wild movie that ends up with him like covered in like red paint and barbed wire, and it's a wild ride.
So, fun fact, I've never seen it. Back in the day, Shaw told me about a movie, and he described it, and I had to do some real digging for it. He gave me a few bits of information, and I managed to figure out what that was. Man, that movie sounds incredibly bizarre. Somehow I've never watched it, but it's just another one of.
I recently got it. No, go ahead.
Just based off who's in it and the sheer weirdness of the plot, I think it deserves to be rediscovered, and I need to watch it myself.
Yeah, I remember it came out, like they recently did like a big, I think it was Arrow did like a big Blu-ray release of it. But I said that title stuck with me forever. Like, oh, it's Brendan Fraser. He's a villain, and it's this weird, like almost stupid title for a movie, but it's so dark and twisted. So yeah, definitely, especially now with him coming back, watch an early Brendan Fraser like go off the rails type, scary type role. It's something. It was definitely when I was like, hey, Amber, you want to watch this movie where Brendan Fraser plays a religious nut?
This thing, it was
like,
another one, very against. Yes.
Sorry.
1998's Mummy, Brendan Fraser. Classic movie. So my number 8 is what I call an adult horror movie. Not because it's chock full of nudity or anything like that, but because of, as a homeowner, it is a hellish situation. It's, you're just trying to rent, help with the bills, so you rent out part of your house to somebody, and it turns out to be crazy Michael Keaton in Pacific Heights from 1990. Matthew Modine and Melanie Griffith buy this beautiful home in San Francisco. They're both young professionals, so they justify this. Okay, we'll rent out part of this big, beautiful house to other people to help so we can afford the mortgage, which probably not the best idea, but it's buying property in San Francisco, so it's going to be expensive. Well, a guy comes by driving a Porsche, waving around a lot of cash to rent a room from them, played by, it's Michael Keaton, and he becomes the tenant. They rent the room out to him, and he becomes the tenant from hell, acting creepy, using power tools in the middle of the night, releasing roaches in the house, and it's Michael Keaton is super unsettling. And if you know anything about like landlord-tenant laws, if once you have somebody in your house, it's really hard to get them out. That's why this, why I classified it as an adult horror movie, because it's a situation a lot of people could relate to, and it's really easy to see how they got into it and how horrible it is to get out of it. I watched this in Iraq. It was lived up to its expectations. Hell of a thriller. Michael Keaton menacing dread, but he can turn on the charm. The cops come by and he's like, oh, I don't know what they're talking about. He can turn it on and off, and he is scary. But this is one of the most realistic horror movies I've ever seen.
Yeah, no, I did make my list, but yeah, no, yeah, that's the weird thing too about when they talk about like, Michael Keaton disappearing. Like, I know he kind of disappeared up until Birdman, but like, I'm like, watch some of the stuff from the 90s, like this or Desperate Measures, or even One Good Cop. It's a movie with him, and it's kind of like his own little Dirty Harry type movie. I love Michael Keaton, and he is, oh God, he is. This movie will kind of make you hate Michael Keaton.
Yes.
And also, from the stuff we talked about to the stuff we're going to talk about, we learned that, yeah, it may be fun to live in San Francisco with the Tanners, but everything else I've ever seen, living in San Francisco is terrifying. If it's not in the movies we've talked about or that we will talk about, or, movies like The Rock. I don't want to live anywhere near San Francisco.
Do you want Michael Keaton living in my house and terrorists trying to bomb me? No. Yeah. A lot of movies make California in general seem frightening, but especially urban California. Whew. Yeah, no thanks.
Yeah. All right, so my number 7 is a movie that we have watched so many times. It's my favorite iteration of this story, because it's a very classic story that's been told over many, many versions of film and literature. Talking about Surviving the Game.
Oh, yes. How did I forget that movie?
It's Ice-T's best movie. I know he's done like 70 years of SVU, but no, Ice-T and Surviving the Game. You have him, again, Rutger Hauer, who is the king. You have it was my first taste of unhinged Gary Busey. So much so that later on in high school, when we would play like the World of Darkness version of D&D, my character always had Crazy Uncle Gary, and I would just quote this movie as like my lines of dialogue for Gary Busey. He was like, I had a pit bull.
Oh man, that story he tells about having to fight his pet bulldog or pit bull, man, this is like peak Crazy Gary Busey.
You have Dr. Cox from Scrubs, like totally terrifying in this movie. F. Murray Abraham. I love Surviving the Game. Again, it's totally, we're just hunting humans for sport. And as much as I love movies like Hard Target and stuff, this is the best version of that story, because Ice-T brings, like, this whole movie is just, it should be remembered because it should be an action classic. Unfortunately, It's not, but it should be, because this movie is great, and it's one of my favorites, for sure.
I completely forgot that movie. It would have made my list. That's why we talked about having to do a part 2 of this list. It will have to show up there. That's a super fun action movie. Again, Rutger Hauer's terrifying. Gary Busey is even more terrifying. So, number 7 is another movie that has a bit of a supernatural slant. And it's a movie you and I and Brian watched once upon a time and laughed a lot about because of the charming and whimsical soundtrack over the crazy things going on the screen. Yes, I'm talking about Ravenous. Ravenous from '99 with Guy Pearce, Robert Carlyle, Jeffrey Jones. Okay, yeah, back when he was still around, not in prison. And Neil McDonough, who another one of those guys. Hey, it's that guy in a movie. So has to do sort of based on the Donner Party. Guy wanders into a camp in California in the 1850s, I believe. And there's it takes place in the mid 1800s in the wild western United States. And he says he and his people got trapped in a cave on the way and had to start eating each other. So the military takes him out there and goes to check out and see what happened. This movie is bizarre. The music, it's really striking, this movie, because it's so upbeat and folksy, but I don't know, that makes it a little hard to take it seriously, but I love how it goes down. I love the lore they go into in it. They did a really good job with the time period of it. And Guy Pearce and Robert Carlyle, I think they nail it. Another one, I don't know how it isn't regarded as a cult classic, because it has all the makings of a cult classic.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this movie, so much so that I'll go ahead and get this out of the way. This is my number 6. I adore this movie, and I love that. To this day, I don't know why again that soundtrack is so off from the rest of the movie. So much to like, it's like you're trying to watch a movie about the Donner Party, and like somebody next door won't stop playing Mumford and Sons. It's really weird. It's so weird. But yeah, no, Robert Carlyle is so good in this movie, and Guy Pearce too. But because this was my big like introduction to Guy Pearce, because I saw this, before most people ain't seen him, Memento and stuff. But this was my first Guy Pearce. But yeah, this movie is awesome. I don't know why. I feel like there was a lot of like those late '90s, early 2000s, and I think they were all Lionsgate movies that just kind of got lost, whether it was because of the marketing or whatever. But I don't know why this movie isn't way bigger, because no, Ravenous is a great time.
I can understand why it didn't succeed at the time, because if you watch the trailer for it, that's not quite what you get.
No.
And I'm sure this must have been a hard movie to try to sell to anybody. It works, and it's so polished and well done. I understand why it didn't succeed initially, but this should be a big cult classic, and it's a shame it's not.
Yeah.
I hope someday it gets its recognition, but Ravenous, there's nothing else like it. The closest thing to it tone-wise would be Cannibal the Musical, which is also great. But
which honestly could have made the list. It is a '90s movie. Who doesn't love?
Oh man, I love that. Love Cannibal the Musical. But that made a good double feature back to back. Yeah. Oh yeah, we will.
So yeah, that was my number 6 again, as Ravenous. Yeah, I take it back. I don't think it was Lionsgate. At the time it was Artisan, and Artisan was notorious for those trailers, like the Blair Witch 2 trailer, which totally doesn't tell you what that movie's about. There's a couple of other movies I could think of where they totally missold every movie they had. That was weird.
Yeah. So my number 6, I remember watching on cable when I was younger, and it was one of the first thrillers I really appreciated. And I think it gets lost in the mix because it's not one of the more well-regarded Martin Scorsese movies. And I won't say it's one of his better ones. But I think it deserves a look, and it's really held up by a menacing performance by Robert De Niro as Max Cady. That's 1991's Cape Fear. I think this movie actually had a decent measure of success. Nick Nolte's in it. Again, Robert De Niro plays this frightening criminal who was thrown in jail for a rape and blames his lawyer for that, who's played by Nick Nolte, gets out and goes on a relentless mission of revenge against him and his family. Max Cady, he's an incredibly scary villain. He can be charming, but he's one of those guys that he grew up poor and uneducated, but he spent that time in prison preparing every day, thinking about how he's going to get revenge, and taught himself how to read, taught himself all sorts of things, and came out an extremely dangerous person. Nick Nolte is just like, it was another case to him. He doesn't barely even remember this guy, but this guy has spent every day of 15 years thinking about him, and he brings that intensity to the performance. Of course, it's a Martin Scorsese movie, so it's beautifully shot. The soundtrack is so intense. This booming music that really ramps up when something's happening, really ratchets up the tension. It's a remake of a 1962 movie with, I think, Robert Mitchum and
Mitchum and
Cary Grant.
Yeah,
the guy from To Kill a
Mockingbird.
Mockingbird.
Because I want to say Gregory Peck, but I don't think that's right. I think it is Cary Grant.
No, you're right. It is Gregory Peck.
It's Peck? Okay.
It is Gregory Peck, which is also a great movie. I think this is, shows how good a remake can be. It gets brutal at times, and Robert De Niro is so unsettling. The things he can do and says, followed up by the abrupt violence, and just the threat. As somebody who has a wife and kid, the threat, somebody threatening you or that family and being able to do it that easily just is really scary. But if this is one you've overlooked, it really deserves a watch.
I do want to address one thing. That's just to tell Gage that this will go up as a video once we've uploaded and once we're done. So you can check back and catch all the other ones for coming in late. We are glad you're here. No, I hemmed and hawed about this one. I don't know how well it was still known. No, I love Robert Mitchum, and he can be scary. I mean, Night of the Hunter. But this is De Niro's movie. I honestly think this might be better than the original, this remake, because De Niro
I'd say so.
So scary, and it's just his knowledge of how far he can push it without breaking the law, and he rides that line through this whole movie, and it's so frustrating to watch. Nick Nolte there's nothing he can do. Like, as a man of the law, the law is not on his side in this instance, and it's what do you do? And yeah, it's De Niro's, that accent, and that southern twang he does, and those tattoos, and the cigar in the theater scene, like it's.
Oh yeah.
This movie is.
I remember that scene was lampooned in The Simpsons. I remember with Sideshow Bob.
The whole
cigar smoking
that's
theater.
Also, that's the other thing is this movie led to one of the best episodes of The Simpsons ever.
Yeah.
Sideshow Bob, yeah.
And I might be off base of thinking this movie's underappreciated, but it's another one, and you can make that case for another one on my top 5 list as well. It's great, and I don't think it gets as much attention as it deserves because it's so massively overshadowed by the rest of Scorsese's filmography. So, anyway, that's my piece on that.
I agree 100%. Yeah, there's other ones I won't talk about. I kind of feel that way too. But yeah, no, I think it's one of. I mean, I'm trying to think. You have Goodfellas, which was 80s or 90s. aside from that, I think this might be Scorsese's best 90s movie. Like, and it's definitely, to me, up there. Of course, I'm the one guy who, like, I love After Hours. I want to talk about Casino. Let's talk about Shutter Island. But no, I do love Scorsese's, like, not mob movies, but this is, yeah, 100% it is overshadowed, and you should check it out if you haven't seen this version of Cape Fear, because it is awesome. My number 5, we finally get to one of my favorite directors. We're talking about David Lynch, not Mulholland Drive, this is 2001. We're talking about Lost Highway. Now, this is a movie that is definitely overlooked because nobody knows what's going on. In fact, I remember the first time I watched it, like, I went, like, when we were, Ashton had been born too long, and, like, I was just like, I'm going to buy all of Lynch's movies on DVD, and I did. I bought all of them. And, like, Amber came home, and I was watching Lost Highway, and she's like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm watching this David Lynch movie. She's like, what's it about? I was like, I cannot tell you. All I can tell you is I've been watching it for 2 hours. It's amazing, and I don't know what's happening. Now, having seen it a few times, I kind of have my own personal theory, which is the best, only way you can really talk about Lynch is what your takeaway of the movie is, your understanding of the movie. But it's the closest Lynch has ever come to making a horror movie, because this movie is scary, both in the movie and in real life with Robert Blake. But the character that Robert Blake plays,
Yes,
is one of the scariest, like, cinematic villains ever. He is pure terror. I will tell you, I'll just go ahead and tell you my thought on the movie. Is there's a line in the movie that Bill Pullman gives early on where he says he hates video cameras because he wants to remember things his way and not exactly how they happened. And to me, there's a twist in the movie about halfway, which this is the movie that kind of signals that for Lynch, because Mulholland Drive does that, Inland Empire does that. To me, that's where it becomes, instead of seeing what happened, you're seeing Bill Pullman's remembrance of what happened, because he likes to remember things his own way. And you deal with who the character Robert Blake plays. Is he just like the embodiment of, like, death and truth? What you can watch every YouTube video you want to about it. The point is, it's a terrifying thrill ride. Patricia Arquette is super sexy in it. Bill Pullman is great. Robert Blake is, what is he? He's just in there beating on his empty plate. What a jerk cat. Robert Blake is the scariest movie monster you'll ever see in it. It's an amazing film. I think it just got, like, it's tonight, I think it's releasing. David Lynch went in and personally restored it into 4K. So we're hoping for that Criterion release. But find it and check it out, because it's definitely not a beginning of your Lynch movie. Like, you can't start your Lynch right here. But, like, this is a real, like I've graduated. Like, I've got a couple of merit badges under my belt. Now we can get into the weird Lynch stuff. Not quite Eraserhead Lynch, but I love this movie. And again, like I said, the first time I saw it, I was like, it's 2 hours long. I can't tell you anything that's happening, and it's amazing. So on that alone, it cracks my top 5.
it's the most confusing movie I've ever loved. I first watched that when I was 21, and I watched it a few times since, and I'm not sure which part of it's real and which of it's not, if any of it's real. Because, man, it makes confusing. Robert Loggia plays that gangster who's pretty damn scary. And I know it's kind of a weird thing to remember. Robert Loggia and his twin turbocharged Mercedes, which does that crazy road rage thing with cool movie car. I know it's a weird thing to gush about in a David Lynch movie because this movie's really dense and hard to follow. Well acted, and like I think probably more than any other one except for Mulholland Drive, very open to interpretation.
Yeah.
Well, my
And
number
we get to
five
talk about
should be-
Balthazar Getty, but how often does that happen?
Yeah, you don't hear much about him anymore. He was the hotness for a little while, then it's kind of faded away, living off some of that Getty money. So, but he does well in it. Everyone does well in it. Even Marilyn Manson in his bit part.
Yeah.
It's a hard. I try to describe the plot, but I don't know.
Yeah.
My
I can
number
give you a
five-
video essay of what my thoughts are, but it wouldn't do you any good.
Yeah, it's something you'll have to see for yourself. My number 5 should be a cult classic. I don't wonder why it didn't succeed, but 100% it should be a cult thriller, comedy, horror, and whatever other genres it holds classic. I wrote a review for this movie way back on MySpace many years ago. Bill Paxton stars in this comedy horror thriller produced by Mel Brooks, The Vagrant from 1992. It's a Bill Paxton's this young professional. He bought his first house and I think it's LA, and he drives his Mazda Miata and has this cute little place, and across the road from him, living in an empty lot, is this really gross, scary hobo played by, let's see, what's his name? Marshall Bell. And this hobo starts terrorizing him, or at least Bill Paxton thinks he's terrorizing him. And so Bill Paxton goes through increasingly more extreme measures to try to stop this guy. And kind of, we were talking about with Ricochet of nobody believes him. It has that trope in it of all these people don't believe this guy who's been generally very dependable. It's bizarre. It's hilarious and keeps on ramping up in the hilarity. Like when Bill Paxton grows a blonde mullet and lives in a trailer park. Well, yeah, I don't think that's giving too much away. Not going to give away the payoff or what's really going on, but it is bizarre. It is engaging. It's really funny. And also, it'd be scary to be terrorized by really smart, crazy hobos. So this should be a cult classic. This deserves all the accolades, and it is completely forgotten, and that's a shame.
No, I will tell you, up until Sunday, when I watched Livewire and then had to reshuffle the deck, this movie was on my list. And the only reason I kind of knocked it is because I definitely want to do like a Bill Paxton deep dive, and I definitely want to talk about this movie because it is so much fun. Those two, you have Michael Ironside as this like put upon cop in it, and things just keep escalating to absurd levels. This movie's so much fun. And yeah, like, I never heard of it. And in fact, I stumbled across it on Tubi and was like, Bill Paxton's The Vagrant, what's this? And yeah, no, this movie should be up there. And I don't know why it's not, especially as beloved as Bill Paxton is.
Hold on, I gotta break away for just a second. Oh
no, you're good. I will say though, Tommy, good sir, that at some point I do want to hear the story, for sure. You don't have to share it right now, but I am curious. I feel like Patricia Arquette's the least likely to offend of all the Arquettes. Well, they all seem kind of, I don't know, they all have their moments. But yeah, I do want to hear the story sometime. But yeah, no, again, like I said, till Sunday afternoon, I was like, I'm going to watch Livewire. And I was like, holy crap, this movie rules. I got to start moving stuff around. And so I lost The Vagrant. But yeah, no, The Vagrant. And it's directed by Chris Wallace, the guy who created the effects for The Fly, directed The Fly 2, which is a movie that I love. I know, what in the world is he doing? Playing the Magnet. It is a movie that I do like. The Fly 2 I do like. I know it's not, it's nowhere near Cronenberg's The Fly, but it is awesome. So yeah.
I'm back.
I also want to do a
All
deep
right.
dive into Lynch someday to see how well that we can talk about that sometime.
That'd be a good way to make me feel like an idiot, but okay.
That's fine.
Yeah.
All right. So my number 4 is one that definitely hits that note of like this movie should be more well known. It is a movie that does have like, it's a movie when you think, oh, this movie's on the Criterion Collection. Everybody knows that, it's a well-known movie, but of the filmmaker's his filmography, like this is one nobody talks about unless they're talking about his infamous films, because this is certainly that, and then nobody talked about this movie until his newest movie came out as a reference point, because it's David Cronenberg's Crash. Now,
oh man,
this movie is wild. So if you want to break it down in simplest terms, and I'll try, but just know that simplest terms won't do this movie justice. Is a man who's James Spader, like peak sexy James Spader. He's super sleazy anyway, but he discovers through a car accident this underground, almost cult-like group who are sexually charged through car crashes, and they have to keep, they the idea of like sitting in James Dean's Spider, like that's what gets you hot. Scars from car wrecks. And there are scenes in this movie that I can't believe ever got put on film. Specifically, this being 96, and there's a scene between James Spader and Casey Jones himself, Elias Koteas, that I can't believe was in a major motion picture for that time. But then on the scene with him and Rosanna Arquette is like, holy F, what am I watching? And this movie was like booed out of cans. Like people were like, this movie is disgusting. And it is for the most part, but on story, but it is like this weird, like dive into obsession. It's beautifully made by Cronenberg, and it's one you can't not watch. Like if you aren't completely just turned away by the synopsis of it, find it and watch it, because it is wow. Like it is up there, and like WTF was happening in movies in the 90s. And to me is the epitome of like a 90s sleazy thriller.
How did that movie get that budget and get a theatrical release? Because I'm pretty sure it was actually released theatrically. Yes.
Yeah, even with the NC-17.
That is... Now, again, I've only seen parts of it, but that's astounding that movie got made at that level. It's one I keep on forgetting about. I got to get around to watching it, just because, and a lot of people confuse it with the other, like the drama from the 2000s Crash. Very different movies.
That movie.
I wonder how many people accidentally rented Cronenberg's Crash instead. That it might be a little different movie night.
I hope tons. Like, this movie isn't about racism at all. No,
sexy car crashes.
You're just watching it and you're just like, how? Like this was a studio movie. Granted, it is like Cronenberg at like the top of his game. Like, we're out of the body horror now. We're doing, this is right after he done M Butterfly. And that's how I discovered it. Was just, again, with like Lynch, it was like, I want to watch all the Cronenberg stuff. I love Cronenberg. And then you get the Crash and you're like, what happened? Like, what is happening? And then you see stuff like, oh, that's why he kind of disappeared for a while, and then hit Existence, which is a movie that you and I can hotly debate. And then, came back with like a history of violence. But this movie, you have to see it to believe it, because there's no way this movie would get made today. I mean, I guess it kind of could because of, it depends how you say it, Titan or Titan. The first movie that's about a lady who gets impregnated by a car. And so it like won the Palme d'Or, so everybody's like, well, everybody loved this movie, and that weird car sex movie that David Cronenberg made, everybody hated. What's up with that? But it's,
Titan, I've heard it described as the Fast and the Furious meets Tetsuo, the Iron Man. So yeah, well, I'll probably get around to that one someday too, but yeah, I don't know, and even I forgot about Crash, but that's one at some point that's gonna make a resurgence when it starts really getting discovered again for the audacity of it, for the being bold and making a movie a big budget movie like that. It's blows my mind that ever got made. So
and
number
when you
4.
and when you think Cronenberg, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. You finish your thought on that.
I was gonna say, when you think Cronenberg, you think The Fly, you think Videodrome. You don't think a movie like this, and yet watching it, you're like, no, there's nobody could have made this movie. 100%, yeah. With Shape of Water. But yeah, but you also have, imagine you had Shape of Water with cars, but you also have, again, peak sex appeal James Spader, Holly Hunter, who is super hot in this movie, Deborah Kara Unger, who is sadly no longer in movies anymore because she pops up in a couple more of these, but she was a staple these times. Yeah, like she did Silent Hill and then just whisked into smoke. But no, just again, there's nobody. As wild as this movie is, you don't think of this movie when you think Cronenberg, but literally, there's no other way this movie gets made. It's like making RoboCop without Verhoeven. It doesn't happen.
No one else could have pulled that off. I don't think anyone else would have tried to pull it off either. So, my number 4 is, it was very well loved in the 90s. I just don't think it's had the same lasting success and love that a lot of other movies have. This is one, I'm not sure if it belongs underappreciated because it was well reviewed and did fairly well in the box office. I just don't hear about it talked anymore. It is an action-packed cat and mouse thriller. We're not sure who's the cat and who's the mouse a lot of the time, with some badass car chases, twists and turns, and a great cast. Ronin. So Ronin was, let me check the numbers here. Directed by John Frankenheimer. Man, that guy knows his thrillers. Made it in 1998. Got Robert De Niro, Jean Reno, Sean Bean, who, spoiler alert, doesn't make it to the end of the movie. Stellan Skarsgård, Jonathan Pryce. I'm just here reading off I forgot just how many people were in this movie. This team of mercenaries is tasked with picking up this package, just some mysterious package. They don't know what's in it, and retrieving it and transporting it safely to their benefactors who are paying for this whole job. And crosses and double crosses and more double crosses. It focuses mainly on Robert De Niro. But you have all these different people with different intelligence or military backgrounds trying to go for this one mysterious case. A lot of cool car chases through the streets of Europe. It's hype. It's fast-paced, tense. It's, in my opinion, one of the best action movies of the 90s. But as a kind of an espionage thriller, it really works too. And I honestly say some of the twists I saw coming, a lot of them I didn't, because it changes it twists so rapidly and so hardly. Uh, and Ronin, of course, the name referring to the masterless samurai of Japan. So that's essentially what this raggedy gang of mercenaries are. But I can't recommend it highly enough. It would probably have been number one, other than the fact that I think it still retains at least a measure of popularity.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that movie, but yeah, you're right. That I think it's just one of those De Niro movies that always escaped me, but I did see it. I think we rented it at some point. Yeah, man, it's a really great like cross and double cross type movie. Like it. And yeah, I didn't realize that there were that many names. Like I remember Sean Bean, Jean Reno, and then De Niro, but I'd forgotten everybody else in that movie. But holy crap!
Stellan
Yeah,
Skarsgård. Stellan Skarsgård's great in it.
Yeah.
But I guess it is somewhat forgotten. Man, it shouldn't be. That should be up there with. I think it's a better movie than Face Off and Con Air myself. It should be at least in talks with those for action classics of the 90s. So hopefully maybe it'll gain more of an audience again, because it really deserves it. Okay. Over to you for number 3.
All right, so we're at the top 3, and you touched on it earlier, but my number 3 is Apt Pupil. So Apt Pupil, to get the story out of the way. Yeah, it is a Stephen King novella, and honestly, it's probably my favorite real world novella that Stephen King's ever written. You know, a lot of people go The Body, you know, Shawshank. This was in that collection, but it's so dark, and it's just watching this boy, you know, turning to evil, this old fragile man coming back to it, and McKellen is so great, and the late Brad Renfro, who was great in this movie. My only complaint, and I know why they did it, besides it's hard to talk about now because of the director. My only complaint is the ending. It kind of gives that, the movie kind of has that Clockwork Orange, well, I guess everything's okay now. You know, the clearly sociopathic person, you know, learned their lesson, so it's all good. Because it ends so much bleaker and darker, so much darker in the story, which you couldn't do then. You certainly couldn't redo it now. It's like trying to do a true adaptation of the Running Man now, and that ending. But yeah, no, this is one of my favorite King adaptations. It's one of my favorite King stories, and I think Bryan Singer like really does ratchet up the corruption, but that both in the weird like symbiotic hate that kind of flows between them, and who is goading who into what. You have a weird Schwimmer's character who they kind of play up in the movie as opposed to the book, is kind of goofy because it is David Schwimmer. Even with that mustache,
Yes.
It takes me out of it. I hate Ross.
Yes, agreed.
But no, and the movie doesn't go as dark as the book does. Like, it gets into what these stories that this man tells about what went on in these camps to this boy, you know, what it does to him, not only mentally, but like physically, like, you know, dark things get awakened in him. It's, and then the ending is so bleak. But I do love that. I love the Stephen King stuff, you know, especially in the 90s. Everything was the big TV stuff with The Stand, The Langoliers, and then the movie stuff was more like The Prestige. You had Misery, you had Stamp, you know, or some of these more 80s, you know, but yeah. Misery was the big 90s King movie, and this one just kind of fell by the wayside. But it's a messed up story that again, because of, you know, the filmmaker probably won't get the recognition it deserves as a movie, you know, separate the art from the artist, but definitely check out At People, because it's rough set, but it's, you know, those two act the hell out of it, and it is a dark movie.
The closest comparison I can think of is American History X, and they're very different movies, but they both deal with the insidious, corrupting power of hate and how it can spread and how seductive it can be. And they both do it they do it in very different ways, but both do it extremely well. And yeah, that's what you're watching, is this kid being seduced and corrupted by this old, just guy who's pure evil. But, you know, like a lot of teenagers, you like hearing the morbid stuff, and in McKellen's character has it in spades.
Yeah.
So number 3. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to move on to number 3. Did you want to say anything else about At People?
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, it's maybe it's not played as well in the movie. I think it is, though, is that you do have that him corrupting this boy, but also they do give you that sense of, like, he's an old man now, like that life is gone. He just wants to die in peace. And honestly, all the evil in him is being kind of awakened because of the you know, the retelling of these atrocities. And so again, it is that double seduction of who is seducing who, and who is shaping who in a way. And there's some striking images in that movie. So it's definitely worth a watch.
Yeah, especially the ones involving Elias Koteas, who you mentioned a little while ago. So, man, another guy, underrated actor. Number 3 in my top 3 is one I watched when I was researching for this list. I watched it at work one night while I was totally working, not watching a movie, and it was produced for HBO. I don't think it ever got a theatrical release. It got put so high on my list because very few people have heard of it, but it was such an excellent movie about a true subject, given the talent that was involved, and given the fact it's based on something real, and they apparently did a pretty good job of adapting it. I think it deserves I looked by a lot more people, especially how much people love serial killer stuff. Well reviewed initially, but it said it just kind of got swept under the rug, lost in the mix, because it's not as sexy or graphic. In fact, it tones down the violence a lot. It doesn't show a whole lot. It's more of the implication, and that's 1995 Citizen X. So Citizen X is about a serial killer who was active in the 70s and 80s in the Soviet Union. And there's this forensic expert played by Stephen Rea, who, again, criminally underrated. He's trying to deal with the horrible bureaucracy and corruption of the Soviet government. But he's trying to figure out this modus operandi of the serial killer and stop him. But every step of the way, he is blocked by bureaucracy. You know, he tells this guy high up in the government, hey, you know, we have a serial killer. And this guy high up in the government says, no, that's a decadent Western phenomenon. Like, those kind of things don't happen here. And trying to convince anyone to take this seriously and get the resources they needed to stop a guy who is murdering children. And this guy figures out pretty early how about he's going about it. But it takes literally years for him to get the help and resources he needs to catch this guy. It does a good job showing how bad things have fallen apart at the Soviet government by the 80s, and it's real bad. Donald Sutherland plays a member of the Soviet military who's trying to help him up in his mission. They are a great pair in seeing the frustration Stephen Rea has with trying to solve this, afraid for the safety of his own kids. And all of this being based on a true story. It is an excellent movie. if you're looking for high concept or, gross out gore or anything like that, it's kind of a quiet movie, but it was extremely well done.
Who is it?
Citizen X also refers.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Citizen X refers to Max von Sydow as a psychologist at one point who kind of writes up a psychological profile of him, and he calls the serial killer Citizen X. Anyway, go ahead.
I was gonna add, I can't remember. Is that the one? Is it Jeffrey DeMunn who plays the killer? Am I wrong on that? Because I think there's a movie where him plays. I always thought it was Citizen X, where he plays a serial killer.
Yes.
Is that okay?
He is, and and a lot of people remember him from The Walking Dead and whatnot. But Jeffrey DeMunn is Andre Chikatilo. It's a serial killer, Andre Chikatilo. Even though he's not the main focus of the movie, he's there. It shows him going through the motions, committing these terrible murders, while they're in the background trying desperately to stop him after they finally get somewhere they need to stop him. It's on HBO Max. If you like anything to do with serial killers or procedurals, man, watch this.
I think I have it saved. I think you can watch it in its entirety on YouTube too. I think I have it saved on YouTube. Yeah, but yeah. So my number 2 is the movie we talked earlier about, the horror movies of the USA Network when we were kids. So when I think of, and this, I don't think this ever went to theaters like this one. I think it was mostly for like, I think it was either USA. It was an R-rated movie, so maybe like an HBO. But when I think of 3 movies from that time on USA, I think of 3 things. One is Cabin by the Lake, but that was like 2000, 2001 with Judd Nelson. You have one that I cannot find anywhere. I wish I could, or it would be on this list. And it's called The Paperboy. And it has the tall woman from, she was a short-haired lady from Baywatch. And he's just a murderous paperboy. And then this one, which is my favorite of the 3, it is 1990's Buried Alive. And it's one of Frank Darabont's first movies. And you got Tim Matheson, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and William Atherton are the main characters. Hoyt Axton from the Gremlins, the guy Billy's dad in the Gremlins plays the sheriff. And so Tim Matheson, he's just your every normal dude. Like, he's just living life. He loves his wife, his job, and his house, and his dog. Jennifer Jason Leigh plays his wife, and she hates this small town. She's having an affair with William Atherton, old Dickless from the Ghostbusters. And they come together with this plot to kill him using like fish toxin that's make it look like he has a heart attack. It works, but they don't give him enough, and so they think he's dead. They bury him in like a cheap wooden coffin, but he wakes up and he breaks his way out. And then the movie just becomes a Tales from the Crypt episode because they think he's dead. He's not dead. He finds out what's going on, and he is seeking revenge on them from inside of his house. And it's awesome. It's like, again, there was a sequel too. That's the exact same movie, just flipped. With I think Jason Patric plays the Jennifer Jason Leigh role, and Ali Sheedy plays the Buried Alive, and Tim Matheson makes a cameo. But no, it is an absolute blast. I hadn't thought about it forever. I owned it. I owned it and its sequel on like a bootleg DVD I got somewhere, like off of eBay. And they just released it on Blu-ray, the first movie. And again, it's 90 minutes. It's essentially a 90-minute long EC comic story where he gets his revenge, and in the most ridiculous way. But it's super fun. It's well acted. It's a great time. Nobody knows about this movie because, again, I only knew about it from watching USA all the time.
Oh.
Watching these horror movies. Is it ringing a bell for you at all,
No.
or no?
No, not even a little.
Yeah.
And that's got some people in there I like, but no, I've never heard of it. But with that plot, I'm intrigued. So yeah, that'll be one I put on my list to watch because you have me interested.
Yeah. Now, the two things I remember the most is the ending because it is a weird, very Tales from the Crypt ending, like a real world Tales from the Crypt ending. There's not like a zombie or nothing. The scene of him like it's like this like slow mo of the rain beating down on the dirt, like, and then the camera like goes through the dirt, fisheye lens style into the coffin, and then like Tim Matheson when he has his heart attack, he has this like insane like death howl that it's so visceral and yet so hilarious. And honestly, I hadn't thought about it in years. And then it's an old episode. You'd have to go back in the archives to find it. But We Hate Movies did an episode over it. I was like, oh my God, I know that movie. Nobody knows this movie. I know that movie. But yeah, it's awesome. And again, it made my number 2. It could have honestly been my number 1. But it's so lost. I was like, no, like, there's like now you can probably watch it, but before that Blu-ray came out, like you couldn't find this movie anywhere. And then so I had to reevaluate with what we'll talk about as my number 1 here in a little bit. But this was top contenders, except for that one because this is just a '90s fun ride.
Yeah, there's getting to be fewer movies that I at least haven't even heard of. I remember seeing the cover up, and man, that one, drawn a complete blank on it. But I look forward to checking that one out. That's what I was looking forward to with this list, is seeing if we could surprise each other with stuff. And you really caught me off guard with that one. So I'm delving into the supernatural again with number 2. I just felt like I could not make this list without including this movie. That despite being a well-cast mainstream theatrical release movie, it's been thrown in the dustbin of history. It's frightening. Denzel Washington plays this role of this detective fighting an utter overwhelming force. It's Fallen from 1998. So Denzel Washington's a detective trying to hunt down a serial killer, and turns out he's up against something far worse, a demon that can possess people by touch. There is one scene in particular in this movie when they're on a sidewalk and the demon's passing from person to person, and you feel the full weight of the sheer odds against him for what he's facing and what he's having to deal with. A killer who can jump bodies by touch. I won't go too much into it, but it's of course an excellent movie in terms of direction and the acting. John Goodman's in it also. It's great from beginning to end. And I realized something a while back that basically it's a better remake of The First Power.
No, go ahead.
It's quite similar. I just think it pulls it off a little better, and it's not nearly as funny as The First Power, but then again, it wasn't trying to be. So, supernatural thriller, late 90s, Denzel Washington. Watch Fallen. Watch it sooner rather than later. It is excellent.
So, number 1, I honestly thought that you were going to have First Power on this list. And I was like, I hope he does because I want to talk about it, but I hope he doesn't. Because if we get the time to do joint reviews, that's a movie I want to talk about.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah, I honestly, just to make it easier on myself, I was like, okay, I'm going to exclude all supernatural movies just so I can have a place to start. Otherwise, we would both be talking about Fallen. This is my favorite Denzel Washington movie. Above everything else, I think it's one of his best movies. It's horribly underrated. Yeah, you have awesome John Goodman. James Gandolfini is great in this movie. Donald Sutherland, and again, the King of the Night, Elias Koteas. Man, Casey Jones was just killing it in the 90s. But yeah, this is one of my favorite like supernatural thrillers. I love this movie.
This bit, Fallen should still be huge. It should be regarded as a horror thriller classic, you know, and trying to kind of get that grimy urban decay feel of Seven. I think it pulls it off better than almost any other movie of that era that tried to kind of get in on that. And it's just so much of it for me is Denzel Washington having a realistic reaction to an incredibly insane circumstance. And just, while watching it, I felt overwhelmed with him, imagining what it would be like to be in that position and have your world absolutely shaken. And you figure out not only is this otherworldly evil real, it's coming for you. I can't speak highly enough about it. I think it's one of the best supernatural movies of the 90s, and, well, one of the best thrillers, too.
Yeah. And it
I'm curious about number one with you now.
Ruin Time Is on My Side for you.
Yes.
Absolutely ruined
that song. Yeah, that song is so creepy. I've seen it used on a few commercials, and that's always what I go to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really wondering now.
Go ahead.
I'm really wondering now if our number ones are the same.
Okay, this again. We didn't discuss anything, so I'm super pumped. My number one, and this is a movie. Again, it's from a great revered director, especially of that decade. It's on the Criterion Collection. I rewatched it the other night with Amber just to like make sure that for sure this is my number one. I think it's one of the best of the decade. Sadly, because of this director's filmography, it falls right between his big breakout hit and then the run he went on in the 2000s. It's 1997's The Game with Michael Douglas. It's David Fincher. It's right between Seven and Fight Club, and then he does this right before Fight Club, and then you have Fight Club, Zodiac, Benjamin Button. Like he goes on his David Fincher-esque run, and this movie's just kind of lost to time. It's an amazing thriller. You have the king of the 90s thrillers, which is Michael Douglas. Sean Penn, a movie club favorite character actor James Redhorn is in it.
Yes.
And it's just a white knuckle ride from start to finish. It's so good. And again, rewatching, I was like, I think this is my number one. I think that's my number one. And then rewatching was like, yeah, locked in. This is my number one underrated thriller. Because again, it's a movie that when you think David Fincher and like name 5 David Fincher movies, nobody's naming this movie. And yet I think it's one of his best.
I remember it got a lot of love at the time. Not a super huge success, but I remember one of our counselors at church camp talking about it. I am ashamed to say I have never seen it, and I really have to fix that because in my researching, that didn't even pop up as something. And again, it's somewhat well known, but given the formidable reputation it has, like critically review wise, yeah, it's and I'll have to judge for myself. I'll have to see how it is, but I don't think I'll be disappointed when I go to watch it. And yeah, that's one I really got to fix quickly.
It does suffer from, and I know it probably was the biggest reviewed complaint is Michael Douglas is your main protagonist. Michael Douglas does not play a likable person. So you really have, I mean, you're rooting for him because you're just watching this guy's like life fall apart to this game, this fun game that he's been put into. But like, he's not a likable person, and he's like super mega rich, and so you're like, F that guy. But it is, as far as like a white knuckle thrill ride movie, it's one of its tops. It's awesome.
My number one, I am genuinely shocked didn't make your list. Because me and you previously talked about this movie being underappreciated. And I don't wonder why it's underappreciated, because it deals with some pretty heavy subject matter. And kind of like Crash, I can't believe they actually got this movie funded and released in theaters. I wonder how many people wandered in this movie and walked out, because I bet it was a lot. We talked about him in the Nicolas Cage list. It's 8mm. Directed by Joel Schumacher from 1999. If you weren't around for the Nicolas Cage list, 8mm is a tale about a private detective who is given a job. This woman's husband had died recently. They're quite wealthy. And she finds in a hidden safe a reel of 8mm film, which appears to contain the murder of a girl, a snuff film. So he's tasked with figuring out if this is real or if this is something that was staged. And he goes straight into hell trying to figure that out. He has to go through the dirtiest, seediest, nastiest underbellies you can imagine, trying to figure out the truth. He picks up a buddy, Joaquin Phoenix, to help him navigate this underground world, recruits him from a sex shop, and goes about it. And it gets darker and scarier and sleazier and grimier with every step of the way. This is not for everyone. This will make you feel dirty after watching it, because of the underground they go into. Again, this is one of those, I'm not going to tell everyone to go out and watch it. But for a thriller, sort of in the vein of Seven, I think very few did it better. This movie got bashed a lot when it came out, I think just because of the really rough subject matter. And it's a rough movie in parts. Nicolas Cage, he makes it believable as a normal family guy who is having to enter this world that really disgusts him, and seeing the mental toll it takes on him as he's trying to figure out this mystery. Trying to think who else shows up in this movie. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank on a lot of the names.
It's Peter Stormare is in it. Gandolfini.
Yes.
The
Peter
creepy
Stormare
guy
is Dino
from
Velvet.
the creepy guy from he plays the warden psychiatrist in Silence of the Lambs. I cannot remember his name for the life of me. He plays Dr. Chalice. Dr. Chalice? No, that's from Halloween 3. Dr. Chilton from Silence of the Lambs.
Yes.
It's got the mom from Rookie of the Year in it.
Yeah.
No, I will say this, that because we talked about this movie on our Nicolas Cage episode, is the only reason it's not on this list. Because I was like, well, this is clearly number one. So I'm gonna purposely leave it off and see where we're at. Yeah, it's one of Schumacher's best. It is probably the most nihilistic film I can think of, for the most part. It's so dark. That scene where he has Gandolfini tied up and he's on the phone with the girl's mom, and he's like, what would you do if you knew that, basically asking her permission to kill this guy. Like, it's so messed up. That whole movie is rough. And sadly, I don't know what happened to Andrew Kevin Walker, because like he wrote Seven, he wrote that, he wrote the Sleepy Hollow movie for Tim Burton, and then he just kind of disappeared for a while. I think he wrote a movie that came out here recently that's not what you would think of as an Andrew Kevin Walker movie. And they're just like, oh yeah, he wrote such and such. And I was like, get out. The guy who wrote Seven wrote that? Really? Because
Windfall and Nerdland.
Yeah.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Chris. If I didn't mention Chris Bauer, unrecognizable as Machine.
Oh yeah. His speech too, when he talks about his motives, man, this whole movie just rips your heart out.
It does. It'll ruin your day. I just think it's so well done, and they were bold and going this direction, doing that. Again, Joel Schumacher was the guy to pull this off. He's hit and miss with directing, but he nailed it and nailed the feel and the fear and the desperation that reeks out of this movie. Oh, And it only gets worse. It only gets worse because you watch this movie, and it is he puts you in that world, and it's so gross. And in the back of your mind, you go, "Oh, this was before the internet, so like it's only worse now." Yes. It's interesting, that relic of the pre-internet age, before it got big, of what these kind of people who were into this kind of rough stuff had to do in order to. They have that one scene that's in that underground media exchange, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it grossed me the hell out. That scene did, but again, go into this knowing it's a rough ride. It's also an excellent movie. I'd say it's as rough as Seven. It's maybe actually rougher. So I found it more distressing myself. Yes.
Yeah,
but
I think it's rougher.
It's well done, and man, I was glued to the screen, and I was just heart pounding, wondering what the next shoe to drop was gonna be, what was gonna happen next. But I warned you, watch it at your own peril. So that's my list.
And that's
and
that was.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna finish. So I'm just trying to play it out in my mind. So that's 98, right? 98, 99 is when that one comes out?
I believe it's 99. I'm looking. 99.
So yeah, you gotta imagine, like Schumacher. He's hit and miss, but you think of movies like Falling Down, even that weird like Nazi vampire movie he made with Michael Fassbender. This is his rebound from Batman and Robin. Whoo! But
that's quite a pyramid to make back to back of two incredibly could not be more different movies. But if we did another list of this, I would have some movies to watch, but I could definitely fill up another list of underrated 90s thrillers. There were so many this decade. There were some I excluded in interest of putting them on future lists. One in particular, which will make my list of sci-fi movies. But I got to explore some movies and figure out some I hadn't seen and some I was glad to see. Some I watched I didn't care for. Like I watched Copland with Sylvester Stallone and Harvey Keitel, and I just thought it was pretty underwhelming despite its reputation. So there's a few I watch. I also watched Hard Rain, with Morgan Freeman and
I'll watch that one too.
Christian Slater, and it was fun, but I don't think it belonged on this list. So did a lot of digging, a lot of researching, and I made a lot of edits to my list of moving things around in order.
Yeah.
But
and again, just think about it. This was like this should be its own 9-hour documentary series, like the 80s of the horror movies of the 80s. It should be thrillers of the 90s, because we and this is just the ones that nobody talks about. You don't even have the ones that people know, like the bit, of course you have Tarantino, you have my mind just completely went blank. You have Basic Instinct, those movies like
Yes.
that. But there are movies that kind of fall between the weird stuff that nobody talks about on our list here today. And those movies, like the one that was on my list forever, and I'll only mention it because it's Amber's favorite, so I'll give her a shout out. Copycat, which is one nobody talks about. Which honorable mentions, go check that movie out because it's a weird, not kind of a 7 kind of knockoff, but you get a weird Harry Connick, like a ginger Harry Connick Jr. in that movie.
There were 2 movies. I'd seen them in bits and pieces over time, so I didn't feel like I gave them an accurate placing. Were Copycat and Snake Eyes, which probably would belong on this list, but since I didn't sit down and watch them all, I'd seen them over the course of many years in bits and pieces. I just didn't feel like it was the right thing to put them on this list. So, but we are open for other ideas for the future and what you want to see us make these lists. I really like the list format. I think 2 months in a row, it's gone really well. So I know we had talked about doing underrated horror movies of the early 2000s, the 80s, the 90s, underrated action. There's all sorts of things we could do, but I love talking about the underrated stuff, the stuff that doesn't get the credit it's due.
I agree. Yeah, like whether it's like they said, like a genre or an actor, a filmmaker, something like that. It's everybody can talk about the best or worst of something, but it's kind of fun to talk about the stuff that some people are missing out on.
Yes, and some of it, and not everything on our list was great, but I think most of it deserves a good look. Boxing Helena.
Yeah.
That's up to you. It's just so damn weird. But yeah, I enjoyed this. As I was curious if we get any matches. We got 1 match. That was hilarious for Ricochet. I would encourage all to check some of these out and let us know if there's any that you think should have made our list but didn't. Again, these are our personal opinions. Love it or hate it. This is just our thoughts on this. We can be right, we can be wrong, but for everyone who joined us, I do appreciate it. Hope you all will come back in the future. Next month, we'll be out with a new list. We haven't determined what that will be yet.
We haven't
yet. Or what it will be over, but we'll figure it out in the meantime. And again, we're open to suggestions. I finally got a new phone, so I'm going to try to, in the next 2 or 3 weeks, post 2 reviews I shot back in February. Things have been pretty chaotic in my life right now, but I think I'm going to try to get it for Journey to the Center of the Earth and The Invitation. I did a short review for those. So hopefully I can get on here and put out some more content myself, and I look forward to doing more lists. And what do you have coming up on the channel next?
I was planning on seeing The Black Phone, but Ashton wants to watch it. So anytime I can get him to go to the theater to watch a horror movie with me, I'll wait. So I'll probably talk about The Black Phone next week. I really didn't have anything planned, especially coming off of last week's, but a little movie drop this week on Paramount Plus, and I feel with everything the way it is socially right now, it's a good time to turn off the brain and have fun. So Sunday's review is going to be Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe.
Beautiful. Just beautiful. Oh, man. What an awesome time to be alive. I would never dream that we would have another Beavis and Butthead movie. But here we are. Man, what a wild age this is.
Amber can't hold her excitement in. She's about to burst. She's so excited.
Just don't record over that copy of Forrest Gump, okay?
Oh, yeah, well, yeah. That's what we'll do. We'll watch half of Forrest Gump, and then we'll watch the new Beavis and Butthead movie. And then pick it right back up at Bubba Gump stuff.
Put the tape back.
Sure.
Well,
I still wish I had that copy. I know I'm pretty sure that tape was like buried, so like buried in that alley somewhere. Like we had to get rid of it. But I wish I knew where that tape was.
man,
I wish I still had it.
I pay large amounts of money to have that tape back just from the personal history of it. But I'm going to go ahead and get going. I appreciate all of you all who joined. I enjoyed it as always, Jason, and I look forward to doing another one in a few weeks. But thank you.
For sure.
I know you have Tommy, Shaw, Blaine, Gage, and I don't know if Logan was able to join us.
For a bit. Yeah.
Man, Travis, all sorts of people. I'm glad. Thank you all for popping in, even if it was just for a little while. I deeply appreciate all of you all supporting us and coming in and listening to our crazy ramblings about movies. Because if any of you know us when we were younger, this is one of our favorite things to do. Well, on that note, I'm out of here. Goodbye from the Northwest. See you all later.